News Radio 1290 WNBF. It's a Wednesday morning. You're listening to Binghamton Now. I'm Bob Joseph. We welcome back to our downtown studio Michael Vasquez, a political blogger here in Binghamton. Welcome back to the studio.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you, Bob, and all your listeners as well.
What have you been up to lately?
Quite a bit. It's been very interesting.
By the way, I remember about a year ago at this time, you were in the fray. You were a Republican candidate running for the nomination, because we all, except for a few of our listeners, recall that the congressional election effectively in this district wound up being held in June, not November, because Democrats didn't wind up running a candidate in the 22nd district. So at one point, you were one of the Republicans positioning to challenge Richard Hanna.
Oh, yeah. Started that in actually 2013 in April and made a very good run for it. Raised up a lot of attention from Herkimer down to Washington, D.C. And I think it was very effective to bring the concerns of the people to the race. And that's why I wanted to be in there. And the future, well, that's unknown. We'll see what happens.
Now, ultimately, you wound up withdrawing from the race and you threw your support to Claudia Tenney. And she gave Richard Hanna a fairly good run for his money. Of course, when you look at congressional races, money is a key. Claudia Tenney was able to raise some money, but compared to the amount of money that Richard Hanna had available to him running against Assemblywoman Tenney, I don't recall the figures, but...
Oh, I know them.
Yeah, I mean, safe to say she was easily outspent.
Well, that was to be expected. I was expecting the same thing. She was outspent over 10 to 1. And for all the spending, which was over $1 million, most of it coming from two PACs, Democratic PACs, or Democratic leaning, I should say, you still wound up with the fact that Representative Hanna won by 2,000 votes, spending 10 times as much, which to me only says one thing. When you're spending that much to get people to buy into your what you're selling, you don't have much of a record to stand on. But that was 2014, and we move forward saying, okay, you were reelected. The message that was sent in 2014 was show a consistent concern about our constituents. Go out there and represent us in a way that you haven't been before. And I've been following.
And what's your sense? Has Congressman Hanna made any adjustments?
He's a horse that doesn't change his stripes. And that's obvious from what we saw already in votes this year. We saw that in January. He voted both for and against President Obama and his executive orders. He said that he voted to state that President Obama overstepped his bounds in 2014, but the very same principle, the very same action in 2012 was perfectly legal, which is kind of odd. You're taking both sides of that issue, and he voted on that. He voted for abortion, third year in a row. Yet again, even though he keeps saying the constituents, the people of his district, all of us, are against taxpayer paying for abortions, and he personally says he's against it, yet he keeps voting for it. Again, we're back to that inconsistent, what I like to call political schizophrenia. And then that leads us to what he did just last week, which is...
And that's interesting. Now, our listeners may recall that we spoke briefly with Congressman Hanna by phone, because he was in this part of the district, I believe, for a couple of days, Thursday and Friday. So we spoke briefly with him before an appearance. It's basically a photo op. Broome County had a media event for new buses built in California. We bought, I guess, 7 BC Transit buses that they drove from the plant near San Francisco, 3,000 miles, so we could use them here in upstate New York. And of course, for people following WNBF News, those buses actually had been in use for 3 months, but they finally had time to set up the photo op on March 12th. So the congressman and the county executive and the guy who runs the buses could all be there and have their pictures taken and be on the 6 o'clock TV news. I mean, something like out of the Chuck Schumer playbook.
Pretty much.
Except it was on a weekday and not a Sunday afternoon. So what else happened, though, when Congressman Hanna was in the Binghamton area on Thursday and Friday? We knew there were some public events, but there also were some things that were not publicly announced, as far as I know.
Well, I can tell you that on Friday, it was absolutely not publicly announced and not notified to the press. I found out through one of my sources that Representative Hanna had selected an exclusive group of individuals and invited them to the Plaza Diner in Vestal to meet him at 7 a.m. until 9 for what would be essentially a public meet and greet. Now, that's the kind of event that media is normally allowed into and invited to, and is also publicly announced. So it was kind of odd that he's doing a public event, but only with a selected group of the public and not notifying the media. So that's why it went down.
So how did that go?
Well, it was quite interesting. It started off late. It seems the staff at the Plaza Diner were not notified of the event beforehand. But once they finally got there, I was told by the staff of Representative Hanna directly that I was not allowed to record any of the event. No photos, no tape recording, no video recording. But I could sit there and I could observe the event, but I wasn't allowed to actually tape it as a member of the press.
This is in Vestal in the U.S.
This is in Vestal at the Plaza Diner.
A public place.
In a public place.
It wasn't the Congressman's Binghamton office.
In what was supposed to be a public meet and greet that he just didn't tell anyone about and didn't let the news media know about. Curious and curious. What could he be saying? Well, he didn't give a speech, because he never gives a speech, as I understand, and he was instead with a staff of 6 people following behind him, speaking to the 30 people that did arrive individually. And he was also, very curiously, handing out a document. Now, Bob, I know you have it. I just gave you a copy of this. On the front page, it's just a flyer about the various services that the congressman provides, which is standard for all members of Congress. And without question, he does a good job on that, and I won't dispute that whatsoever. But the part that's very interesting is when you turn it over on the back, it has a very selective listing of some of the votes that Representative Hanna has put out there, and it also states that he's a supporter of the Second Amendment, which he said many times. But then also on that same page, there's a little survey there, which says, 1, asking about fracking, and 2, and this is really curious, it's asking about, and I quote, "Do you support additional gun control measures?" Well, he's an advocate for the Second Amendment. He's standing up for us. He supposedly has said that he's against the SAFE Act. Why is he trying to find out from a select group if he should have more restrictions?
So what do you read into that? What do you infer that that's one of the questions that was included in the brief survey that the congressman was distributing last week in Vestal?
I think the entire event was a way to start his 2016 campaign. I believe that he's trying to establish a record for himself, something to try and stand on, which he obviously didn't have in 2014 and nearly lost because of it. And I think he's afraid of Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi up in Utica, who I believe is also starting his process to run for 2016. And I think that the gun control question is a run to the left to try and gain support from the Democrats that he's going to lose if Mr. Brindisi is, in fact, the challenger.
At the gathering at the diner in Vestal last week, how many people were there? How many people showed up, would you estimate, who had responded to the invitation from Congressman Hinchey? Excuse me, I'm talking about a blast from the past. I'm sorry, I was thinking buses, the bus station, the Binghamton bus station named for Congressman Hinchey. Congressman Hanna.
Mr. Hanna had a total, from the time that I was there, from 7 a.m. until 8:45, 15 minutes before the event officially ended, a total of 30 people.
Anybody you recognized?
Several.
Movers and shakers?
No. No, just people from that I've seen in the community who have been active and I've been able to speak to. The average age of the people there, I was the youngest person at 47 by visual. And I was
but
also
are these
the
people who've been notably active in Republican circles in Broome County?
Some.
Yeah. Names that I would recognize?
I couldn't say, and I wouldn't disclose.
Okay, but
no one
were any of them local officials? I mean, elected officials?
No.
Okay.
No elected officials, no politicians.
All right. So a little bit of a cross section.
A very limited cross section. Let's see. There were no people of color besides myself. There was no one under the age of 47 that I could visibly see.
Do you have any sense, did you speak with anybody to get a sense of how it happened that they were invited to this gathering at the diner?
It was a robocall made out to select individuals. I have yet to hear from Representative Hanna's group on how they selected these individuals or why it was just to a select group. I have yet to hear why it was not publicly announced, even though after the event, he's publicly using pictures from the event to raise awareness, and it's his public meet and greet, and he's using it to his advantage. That's a little odd, I think.
Now, I'm surprised that they imposed a restriction on recording. I'm wondering, now obviously, although you have had a political blog and you've done reporting on your own around here for a long time, I'm wondering if they treated you differently than, say, if somebody from Channel 12 Action News showed up, or somebody from Fox 40 or News Channel 34 or Time Warner Cable News. Say if they happened, somebody tipped them off and said, hey, the congressman's going to be meeting with some constituents at a diner in Vestal. If nothing else, it's a great picture story. Even if you don't record a lot of the dialogue, but that seems to me almost a made-to-order TV story to put in the lineup. It just makes me wonder if they would have treated people from the so-called more traditional news media differently than they treated you as a political blogger, also as a past challenger, a candidate who at one point was challenging Congressman Hinchey as recently as a year ago. I wonder if that was a factor too.
Well, it shouldn't be, because I established a reputation a long time ago on my work as a blogger, as a political commentator for 7 years. And I stopped that for the purpose of the run, and when the run was over, I went back to my work. And I've continued to meet and interview politicians throughout the Southern Tier. No one's ever had a question about my credentials or my credibility. So this would be the first time. If it's based on that, it's the first time anyone's ever done that. I can say that, would he have treated someone else different? Maybe, but we'll never know, because he never invited anyone, and that's really stunning. And I have to say, why? Why would you not invite? And obviously it was held very close to the vest, because I have my sources. I'm sure we all in the media have our sources, but yet no other media service was able to find out about this besides myself. That says it was very exclusive and selective, but yet it may be defining some legislation coming from our representative based on the survey he's putting out there that most people would not agree with in this district.
Did you ask Congressman Hanna one-on-one as this was going on if he would let you record? You mentioned that somebody working for the congressman said that no audio and no video recording would be permitted. Did you ask him directly, may I record?
Two of his members, his press secretary, and another of his members were the ones who told me that. And no, I couldn't get a chance to speak to him because he saw me, he waved at me, and then walked away from me.
You didn't say anything like,
Not immediately. It wasn't
"Hi,
until...
Mr. Vasquez," or "Hello, Michael," or...
No, not until 2/3 of the event had been done. I was sitting down. He finally walked over to me. I was able to speak to him for about 5 minutes or so, asked him 2 questions, and then he was gone. I did ask him directly if he would do an interview, which he has yet to do with pretty much anyone, as far as I know, since 2011, and if he would answer questions and take a direct interview. He asked his press secretary to see if that was possible. I again asked, "You're the boss. If you say yes, we can work out what time with your secretary." And he said, "We'll see," and then walked off.
So he didn't say no, but he didn't do anything to facilitate setting up an interview with you.
I would have to believe that if he wanted to do an interview, the answer would be yes, and we'll figure out when. When I hear "we'll see," I think we've all been in that situation to know what that means.
Yeah, well, I mean, Governor Cuomo, for example, didn't tell me "we'll see." He said "sure," but when asked directly, face-to-face, would he come on the program, I mean, that was well over a year ago. He said sure, he didn't equivocate, but, you know, sometimes "we'll see" and "sure," I guess, are equal when it comes to, to office holders. Anyway, if you had the chance, and Congressman Hinchey occasionally does some interviews on this program, he occasionally does interviews with other I'll say traditional media, newspaper reporters, TV reporters on occasion. I don't know that he's ever done an interview with bloggers. If he has, I'm not aware of such an interview. If you did have a chance to sit down and conduct an interview with Congressman Hinchey, what would be the first question you would ask of him?
Okay. Well, let me...
And again, I'm sorry, I keep saying Congressman Hinchey. Again,
It's Hanna, yeah.
yeah, Congressman Hanna.
I can understand why there's a confusion, but let me first backtrack. I'm not just a political commentator with a blog. I'm also a member of the press under theexaminer.com. So I also have national exposure besides the international exposure of what I've done as well. What would be one of the first things I'd ask him? Mr. Hanna, can you explain to me why your voting record, including the amendments that you don't mention, but are part of your record and reflect the constituents, can you explain to me why that looks like political schizophrenia? Why are you taking both sides? Where do you stand on the issues? Exactly, where do you stand? That would be the very first question I would ask him, because I think that's the most critical. I would also ask that of Assemblymember in D.C. if he is in fact trying to run, and I believe he may be, why after 2 years of being absolutely silent about the SAFE Act, New York SAFE Act, that you're suddenly trying to repeal, why are you suddenly coming out and making a hoopla that you've been silent on? So again, it's about being accountable to the people.
By the way, we just got an email from a listener in Endicott. I received a postcard invitation in the mail for the meeting with Congressman Hanna. It arrived on the day of the meeting, after the meeting was already over. It asked me to RSVP if I was going to attend.
Well, there's our government in action.
So, for what that's worth. As we wrap up the segment, do you have any intention of running against Congressman Hinchey in the future? And again, Congressman Hanna... We'll edit that out of the West Coast feed. Would you entertain the possibility of challenging Congressman Hanna in the future?
It's possible. What I'm doing right now is just informing the people and the public and letting them know about something that was denied them that they should have known about. But if anyone were to ask, gee, is that a reason why you should run again? Possibly. Would I possibly do it again? Maybe. That final answer hasn't come up yet, but it's coming close. We might see some answers.
So you won't rule it out?
Absolutely not.
People interested in your writings, what can they do? If they want to see what you've been up to, your most recent writings, and some of the things you've done in the past?
They can see, if they go to www.mvass.com, That has a listing of over 2,000 articles I've written, plus over 200 videos I've done since 2007, covering every subject that our government has dealt with, and internationally and on the local level. I cover every topic.
Michael Vasquez, always a pleasure. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
Coming up on Binghamton Now.